if we're not setting reserves back for this scale that we're trying to create, we're not creating any stability. And if we're not maintaining any stability, we're going to constantly be in a state of fear where we think we have to go make more money because we're constantly increasing our expenses without justifying the increase in revenue and the increase in profits to set up for it.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Perfectly Mentored. I'm your host, Jason Portnoy. On this episode, what I did was I brought in Chris Robinnette. He is the founder of Lighthouse Financial Planning, and I brought him in to speak to our clients through the agency and through our consulting and training program. I brought him in to speak to our private clients, to come in and talk about leadership, wealth building, legacy, how to make sure that you're taking care of for your family and make sure they're all in place. And as an entrepreneur, how do you grow the business with leadership skills and with wealth building in mind? And even if you're an employee, I brought him in to talk about how employees could start learning how they could start building wealth, even though they don't own the business. You're not going to want to miss this episode. Very rarely do I take private client calls where I bring someone in to teach our private clients who pay us a lot of money in order to have access to those type of people. Very rarely do I share it, but I thought this was worth sharing. So you're not going to want to miss this one. Check it out. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Great, Jason. How's it going, buddy? Looks nice and warm out there.
Yeah, not too bad. Just the same weather as Nashville, although this is a regular day for us and, you know, record lows for you. So, but I'm on my way to see you. I'm on my way. Look, besides your horrible taste in hockey, let's tell the listeners a little bit. How'd you become like the go-to for wealth building and leadership advice? Just give some background, and then we'll kind of dive into some tactics and some strategies.
Yeah, outstanding. Kind of being the go-to is funny because it's sort of what I aspired to early on in my career. Is I wanted to be the guy that everybody was like, I got to know the guy. And then as I've done this job longer and longer, I realized I don't like all the pomp and flash. And I'm kind of shifting to like having more of that mystique and referral based feeling, and business has gotten way better. And where a lot of that came from is, so I did 11 years in the Navy. And so way back in the day, I'll give you a little backstory on why I started this job, but August 28th, 2005, as we were deploying to Iraq, my mom passed away. And so we're mission critical. So they had no way to get me off the ship. And so it was a good 7 days after she passed away before we even got to the Straits of Hormuz. And I could take a cab to Dubai. So I could fly to London, JFK, and then make it back to Oklahoma City. And so it was about 10 days after she passed away. And what my grandparents and I kind of found is most of the stuff that we thought was all settled in the estate and like protected by the trust and things like that, a lot of it ended up being pilfered from the house. A lot of it wasn't accounted for. Our estate wasn't going to go through probate, but the way they talked to my 19-year-old sister, like, hey, to avoid probate, we should just give your stepdad more money, even though he wasn't going to get it in the trust. I wasn't there to argue. So it kind of shifted. It ended up costing my sister and I about $1.5 million that would have been inheritance for us that went to him. We ended up having to fire sell some properties because we gave away all the cash. So then we ended up losing value on those. And I learned a lot of life lessons from that failure. And, coming through the Navy, one of the things is always like how to fail forward faster so you learn and grow and can teach people your mistakes. And so originally I thought about doing mergers and acquisitions. I had a job offer with JP Morgan coming out of my MBA program. And I took a full pivot in 2011, coming out of the Navy, coming out of my MBA. I moved to Nashville. I knew two people when I got here. And I said, I'm going to do full-on financial planning with the sole purpose of protecting families so they don't go through the things that my 19-year-old and 23-year-old self went through at the same time. So because of that, I really dove into the Nashville scene. I tried to meet and greet everybody. I wanted to be the guy, like I was saying, because I wanted to be flashy. I wanted to, wear the fancy suits, wear the Rolex, carry myself.
The ballers style.
The flash dancers, my friend, the flash dancer, where, you're trying to fit the scene, but, you're a Miami thousandaire at the same time. So you're carrying yourself like a millionaire, but you're worth $1,000. It worked out a lot better for me because my sister and I still did have an inheritance. I had done a lot of day trading early on in the early 2000s, just after the peak bubble blew up. I did a lot of day trading on the back end to make a lot of money that I had for myself. So I actually had like a nest egg and a roadmap to start my career. So I wasn't going full sales slinging mode. When I talk to entrepreneurs now, that's a lot of the stuff I kind of talk to them about is like, what does your reserves look like? In a lot of the online spaces, they talk about annual renewal revenue, monthly renewal revenue. Is it recurring? And how is it going to cost to obtain clients? And then what's it cost to fulfill on clients once you've obtained them to keep them? And so it became really obvious to me that it costs money to get people to want to meet with you. We'd have to go to dinner, we'd go to drinks, we'd carry them out to hockey games. It'd be several $100s, $1,000 sometimes to acquire a client. And we still had to fulfill on all the implementation before we even really got paid. So now coaching young financial planners, we talk through like the benefits of doing actual financial planning, because now we get paid to advise clients. We charge an annual engagement fee to put us on retainer so that we don't have to sell products, but that also brings cash in the door when clients are starting versus us maybe spending 3 to 6 months with somebody and not delivering anything. And then we never get $1 because the commissions weren't there. So that's kind of how
it also gives you that fiduciary responsibility, right? Like a little bit, because now you're not buy this stock, sell this stock. It's like you said, you're not pushing products.
Yeah, exactly. It's complete autonomy on the ways clients want to go. And so I feel the leadership in that came from probably my 4th or 5th year in the business. I mean, I was hitting on all cylinders. I'd already won like Veteran Business Owner of the Year. I've already won 40 under 40. I've won Nashville Young Leaders Awards. I got a whole shelf of awards in here that I won from the company. I won every Rising Leader Award they had for the first 5 years. I won New Associate of the Year for the state. Like, there was just a lot of things that I'm like, this is great. But the problem was, it wasn't defining who I was as a person. It was creating external validation to prove I'm capable of fulfilling wickets to other people so they should come work with me. But I was still chasing. I was still hunting the next client, and I was still putting myself out there as, here's why you need me. And as I kind of didn't care anymore about all the trophies and the accolades, and I started caring more about just the existing clients I had, I was able to dial in deeper on like, how do we create raving fans? How do we truly build 30-year relationships that turn into 30-year friendships? And these 30-year friendships are where I get some of my greatest referrals. And so now we don't even ask clients for referrals anymore. Typically, we get 1 to 2 introductions a year from our really big clients because they find people just like them. They understand how our experience has gone with them. And they're like, hey, you should talk to my guy. It's not the cheapest people out there, but it's highly efficient and it's very helpful for everything you're doing. And so we've been able to mold what used to be, for me, everything I talked about was financial planning. Now it's a lot of mindset. Now it's a lot of business acumen. Now it's a lot of, hey, where's some relationship advice and stress management? Hey, are you going on vacations and allowing your body to reset and recharge? Like Taylor, a mutual friend of ours, talks all the time about what used to be the morning formula and, your energy cycle and how you start optimize things like that. And so I've been able to incorporate a lot of that stuff to really dive in with entrepreneurs on such a broader base than just, hey, we need to open an investment account. Because let's be frank, I open an investment account, say we average 8 to 12% a year. That's wonderful. If I can show you how to increase your EBITDA or help you raise revenue without increasing costs so much so you grow profits, and now your ROI internally in your business is 30 to 40%, what was a better use of our time together? Helping you grow your company and make 30 to 40% because you're reinvesting in yourself, or take the money that you could have reinvested in yourself and start offsetting you in something at 8%. And my arguments become, we should do both. 80% of your funds should stay in your company and you should reinvest in what you're doing. And let's start building scale. Let's start getting decentralization. Let's get some C-suite in there not product, but more project manager-based people to help run multiple divisions so our owners can start stepping back into the visionary role that they're designed for. And we incorporate these integrators into running all these day-to-day. So now we can look at amazing potential for an exit. Even if it's $1 million exit on a company you grew 5 years ago, That's $200,000 a year over 5 years that you put into investing in yourself. And so where we've found that the biggest change comes now is let's talk post-exit, so that's where a lot of leadership is on our side is how did we get your tax people set up correctly? How do we get you introduced to a family office if we're going to take a $10 million plus sale or not? How do we get you introduced to the right kind of estate planning and business planning so we can start protecting from estate taxes, not just income taxes today, but state taxes in the future, and building all of this around itself, I find has helped create a lot more of establishing values, principles, and knowledge in the actual companies. And building on those three legs are where the true wealth generation for our clients has started coming from. And that's been, I'd say, probably my biggest pivot to, helping people.
No, I love that because I think it's super important. So, when I first started, like every entrepreneur, they're scared to invest in themselves, right? They start making money and then they know they need a shit. The next move would be hire a team. But it's like, well, what if it doesn't work? Then I'm paying money. I have so much money. I'm making all this profit already. I want to protect it. I want to protect it. And I met with someone a long time ago who told me, why are you scared? I'm like, well, I don't want to fail my family. At the time I had like a young kid. Now I have 3 young kids. What happens if it all goes to zero? What happens if I lose my business? Said, okay, is your family protected? And we work from the outside in so that I feel more comfortable, knowing that my family's protected. And that allowed me to take a little bit more risks inside the business, knowing that I got the family side handled. So I guess my question to you is twofold. One is that how you believe every entrepreneur should start looking at it? Make sure your personal side's taken care of so that you're allowed to take the risks on the business that don't interfere with the personal. And then 2 is why do you think so many business owners are so scared to take that investment into growing their business, like that 80% keeping it in, and they want it all, or they hoard to save and not invest?
Owners that we have to build a war chest, plain and simple. No time in the medieval world or anything like that did anyone defend a kingdom that didn't have ample reserves to protect from a siege or protect from an outside invader or anything. Most people didn't just build up a little bit of money and then go completely try to attack the next village and say, I'm on conquest now. But so many entrepreneurs think of it that way. They're like, hey, I'm making 10K a month. I've only ever made 6K a month. We're going hard on this 4K of bonus and I'm going to get it to 25K a month. Yes, that is an amazing idea. However, if we're not setting reserves back for this scale that we're trying to create, we're not creating any stability. And if we're not maintaining any stability, we're going to constantly be in a state of fear where we think we have to go make more money because we're constantly increasing our expenses without justifying the increase in revenue and the increase in profits to set up for it. Now, back to your original question of like, should we protect the family and then get to attack the business, or attack the business so that we can protect the family? Psychologically speaking, behavioral analysis says if you are in a constant fight or flight mode, you're never going to think through things clearly. If you're constantly worried about fight or flight, friend or foe, cortisol is flowing through your brain at all times, and you can only operate at the most intrinsic level of training that you've ever had. And so you just kind of stall constantly on like, I can't do the next thing because I don't know what the next thing is because I haven't done it before. So if we build a war chest, if we have ample personal reserves, right? I mean, this could go into simple things like my brand new doctors and attorneys, we talk about this all the time. Let's get term insurance and let's get disability insurance, just so if anything happens along the way, the legacy that you were building is fulfilled by the life insurance. Or if you get disabled along the way, the income continues to come in. Most entrepreneurs don't think that they should do any of those things because they're like, well, I heard I need a big whole life policy for tax-free money. So I'm just going to wait till I have so much money, I'll get one of those. But then something could happen in the next 5 years that we don't even qualify for the life insurance anymore. And so a lot of times my argument's always like, let's get death benefit with term insurance. Let's apply for disability and some business overheads.
Especially when you're young and it's cheap.
When you're young,
yeah.
It's so cheap. But if you know that you're covered, if you know your spouse is covered, then you know your kids are protected. You know your disability is covered. You got liability insurance. You got, you have the home and the auto. You have all the other kind of pieces. All that foundational work is established. Most of the time, you'll start sleeping better at night because your cortisol and your stress are going to go down because on the hierarchy of needs, you've satisfied almost all of your needs. And we're starting to build that defensive war chest. I mean, we're able to invest cash that businesses still own in the entity in money markets that are making interest rates. Lots of clients that we talk to just leave it in their Chase account, leave it in their Bank of America account, wherever, but they're making zero money on it. So they're constantly afraid they can't keep up with inflation.
They're actually losing money. But yeah.
Exactly. So if we're able to just show them, hey, shift this $200,000 over to this account and make 5%, you still have $100,000 in your current operating account and they're linked. They're just bank accounts, they're linked.
Yep.
And move some of your personal funds over. So now you're making some interest on your tax account while you're waiting to make your actual tax payments, and there's just ways to start moving just little shell pieces to start stacking that foundation tighter. And where I've kind of gone on this is Legos versus Lincoln Logs, right? Like you're old enough to remember Lincoln Logs. Some of these young kids out there might not have a clue what they are. It's nothing worse than in building an entire Lincoln Log house and then your little sister come in and just kick it and they go everywhere. But you build some Legos, they come in, they kick it. A couple Legos fall off. Most of the entire thing is still together. So the interlocking dynamic is build a business like you're building Legos. It's going to take you a little longer. You actually have to do some work to put the pieces together, whereas Lincoln Logs, you just set everything on it. But Lincoln Logs can go everywhere in a second because you have nothing interlocked holding itself together. And so this is more of the mindset and psychology that we discuss with entrepreneurs starting out is go slow, find a good base, find a good foundation, and let's figure these pieces out. Because honestly, like if we were to do financial planning for someone, it's going to take 2.5 to 3 years before we really kind of get it to a place of autopilot because things are constantly changing. Their pay is changing. Their P&L is changing. Hopefully their revenue and their
goals are changing.
And their goals are changing. And yet so many people are hyped up on TikTok videos and IG reels that are like, hey, do an infinite banking thing and throw $200,000 in there, pull all the money out 2 weeks later. I mean, all those things are valid. You could do them, but that doesn't mean the internal rate of return on them is going to be great. And you're adding more risk and more stress to your life. And so I happen to love
the infinite banking system. I think it's one of the most underrated things, but I'm not one of those people who sit there and say, hey, look, you start this tomorrow and now you have cash and now you're partying and now you go buy whatever you want.
Exactly.
I did it because one is I did it for my kids. So each one of my kids have a whole life policy. Some may think that's morbid or whatever, but no, I think it's the greatest gift at 18 years old or 20 years old. If I did a pay 20 or whatever it is, I give them a policy that they have the cash value in there, that they could go put a down payment for something. They could go pay, they could go start a business, whatever they want. And it keeps growing and it's paid for. I'm giving them probably one of the best gifts I think any parent could give their kid.
And how about we don't ever give it to them? Even better.
Wow.
Can you imagine if you allow your trust to then own the same policy that's paid for? And now your children can borrow from the trust and now they don't own the cash. So they can't be sued for the cash. They can't lose it in a divorce. They can't lose it to a business partner because all the money is owed back to Jason because Jason's trust actually loaned it to his children. And now the trust makes a little bit of interest. They take some income deductions for their company. And if they ever get sued, the trust now is first lien on all the assets they have been growing. So it's like, whoa, sorry. It's not my house. My dad's house. He just put the down payment down. Like I owe him this money back. Like, I mean, think about
I like it.
Building up something for your kids, having it fully funded, and then have them fully insulated from creditors and protected from divorce and other spouses or things like that. So that now people that are marry them because they love them, not because they want to get to the money. That's a whole nother mindset.
Well, their whole life policy isn't big enough for people to love them just for the money, but we'll get there. We'll get there. That's the goal.
Just saying, it's all amazing how they work, but you got to have discretionary income. You trying to jam these things. I mean, I see people put 40% of their income in these things, and they don't have 40% of discretionary income. And all of a sudden they're like, well, I just got to make it work for 5 years and then I'll be golden forever. And I was like, well, what if it doesn't work? Because you run out of money in 2 years.
So I think that's a great thing. So talk to me a little bit about, one is, I want to touch, because you said every business should have reserves. So before we even go down this route, what's a good amount of reserves? Like, what's a safe amount? Like, don't start investing until you have X.
Yeah. I mean, I tell companies 3 months minimum of operating expenses is bare minimum. That can fluctuate. I mean, sometimes I see a lot of people out there saying, hey, if you don't have $80,000 to $100,000, saved up in cash, you don't need to worry about doing big investments. That's also true. But if your monthly burn is $50K, I would still rather see you have $150K before we start worrying about stuff like that. So, I mean, there is a ratio to the burn. I love the idea and how I run my company. I have 12 months of current employee salary set aside. So even if everything hits the fan, I have to cut off everything else I'm paying for. I still have 12 months of employee salary covered in our operating account to fix the holes and cover the problems. I don't necessarily need 12 months of ads spend. I don't need 12 months of tech spend because I'll just turn them all off if it gets that dire. So that's where I kind of look at some of the thresholds a little differently. Like, yeah, you can have 6 months of all your operating expenses. That's a great number. I mean, I think that looks really healthy. Once you've gone to 6 months in the war chest, we don't really need anything more in the war chest. Everything else after that should be going to the opportunity fund, So you can keep it in the same bank account and just earmark $500K as war chest and everything above that's opportunity fund. Next thing you know, you got $800K in there. $300,000 to go acquire another line of business, to go pick up a C-suite, go pick up an integrator, go pick up, anything that you want to do. I like them being in 2 different bank accounts because I want to nickname one of mine the war chest, because psychologically, if you read the account and it says war chest, you're going to think of it like your war chest and it's going to stay defensive and you're going to want to protect it and you're going to hoard it just like a dragon, and it's perfect. The other one's your opportunity fund. You get excited when there's a lot in there because you're allowed to go spend it on opportunities. It's not called the boat fund. We don't get $300,000 in there and go buy a boat unless that's on the agenda of goals that we want to chase after. So, and like you and I've talked about it several times before, but it's dialing in these mindset pieces is so much more important than dialing in a rate of return that you're going to get by doing stuff. Because
knowing what you want, because so many people are like, hey, I want to build this business to $20 million, and they don't know why, or they don't know, or then they'll have another goal. Then they'll meet with you. They're like, okay, the goal is 20 million. And you're like, all right, how are we going to protect the family? And they're like, well, do this. Well, that's going to affect the 20 million. They're like, well, and then the goals just started. They don't know. It's like, I always come back to it. It's like Alice in Wonderland with the cat, right? When Alice asks the cat, what direction should I go? And the cat's asking, which way do you want to go? She goes, I don't know. And it goes, it doesn't matter which way you go. Anyway, we'll do. Yeah.
People have a fear of getting extreme clarity in what they want. And a lot of that fear of the extreme clarity is if they go get clear, it's going to be harder than they thought it was. And it's not that there's a fear of it being hard. It's a fear of the uncertainty about how hard it could be. And so they bury their head in the sand because taking the first step is the hardest. But so many people just say, hey, there's 5 steps, I'll get there. But really, what if we just made it into 100 steps? What if we took your $20 million in a big ass whiteboard and just started reverse engineering? Put 20 million over here and let's reverse engineer as much as we can come up with all the way back to here's where we are today. Say it's 1 million. Well, even on this path of reverse engineering, we can put as many subsets and drop downs below it, build some sub tabs, say, hey, if we actually did hit this, I would have to add this. Next thing you know, this massive whiteboard could be covered with everything that we data dumped out of our brain that we've been sitting on for forever. The greatest way to find a solution sometimes is to identify the problem as clearly as possible and write it down. People don't do it. It's amazing. I don't know how I'm going to get to Nashville today. Great. Write down the problem as clearly as possible. I'm sitting in the airport wondering if I'm getting on this flight because de-icers may or may not be an issue, boom, 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 boom. By the time you write the entire thing down is the problem, half of the solutions have already been created by your brain because your brain wants to answer questions, but only if you ask it questions and allow it to think. So by allowing your subconscious to run, you'll sit there and self-identify. Well, they have de-icers here. They might not have them in Nashville. I just might not ever leave Nashville. But I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to sit by the gate. I'm going to here. Boom. Solutions. And you're not even in control of any of it. So you can only control the controllables that you can handle. But when you start realizing these problems that we're creating in our head are things we can't control, you have to just let go and let God handle it. You know, like, well, I can't control it.
That's a hard thing. That's a hard thing for entrepreneurs who want complete control. No matter how many times they say they don't want the control, they always want the control. So letting go is probably one of the best advice you could ever give, like that we've ever had on the show that you just gave for an entrepreneur. But it's way easier said than done, like almost everything in life. But yeah,
I mean, to me, complacency runs when we get too comfortable at the level we're at and we become afraid of what it's like to get outside that level again. The reason most athletes don't recover from an injury is because they hadn't had a failure. Everything had been a success. Everything had been easy. Nothing was a problem. Those legs just always worked. Then boom, tore the ACL. Boom, we had to rehab. Now, every time they go to jump to catch the ball, it's in their head. Oh, how do I land? Oh, do I land a different way now? And then they're more likely to get injured again because now they're thinking about it. They're not allowing their body to just run. Entrepreneurs are the exact same way. They are so afraid to fail, they don't give themselves the opportunities to learn how to grow. And that's why they stagnate out, because they get super complacent, because they'll sit here and tell you to your face, hey, coach, I want to make $45,000 a month. I want to do this, this, and this. Here's how amazing it's going to be. But I'm at $25K for the last 3 years. Well, why aren't you growing? Well, it just took me so long to get to $25K. I was just worried if I change a few things around, what if I go back to 15? So are you now playing to not lose? Or are you still playing the game to win? Because if you don't want to lose, you can't physically grow because you focus on that comfort and you don't let go. But when we allow ourselves to do impossible things, you see people doing ice plunges. You watch people do like the 4-day immersion boot camps that Nate Bailey and I run. You know, you watch people do physical stressors that force their brain to go into subconscious mode because they have to focus on the 3-foot world they're in right now and then focus on the teammates that are with them on achieving these objectives that they place. Their brain goes in autopilot. Now their subconscious starts thinking through all the things that it's been draining out on, and it starts saying, we could actually achieve that. Look, we just carried this log 500 yards, and I didn't think we'd even pick it up. Crap, what else in my life could I be doing? Because we allow ourselves to get uncomfortable in controlled environments to prove that we can expand who we are, and then it gets easier. We don't go from 25 to 45. Let's go from 25 to 30, 30 to 37, 37 to 50. Let's just blow right past the 45 because you said it as a limiting belief because you thought that was going to get you to everything. But people don't focus on milestones anymore. Everyone focuses on the finish line. If I just sell my business for $20 million, I'll be happy. You ain't going to be happy. You'll have money. But if you're not laying the foundational work to have fulfillment in your life that's not externally validated by how you run your company and how you identify as being the business owner of X company, you're never even going to get to the point to sell it because then you'll self-sabotage the sell of it because you're afraid of what's going to happen afterwards. But worst case scenario, we do give you the $20 million. And now you're sitting at home bored, hating your life because you're like, I thought I'd be happy. The only time there's a finish line in our life is the day we die. That's it. Otherwise, the best day of our life, the worst day of our life, we have to do something again tomorrow. And so by starting to set wickets and milestones, now it's just laps around the race. Now it's just rounds of golf. Hey, I golfed this course, I hit a 94. Who cares when anyone else hit? Your now goal is to hit less than a 94 next time you play. Sometimes you're going to golf worse. But consistently doing it and setting the milestones and going through it, you're going to get better and better and more efficient. And that's literally, it's just the mindset. And so wealth is truly defined to me on how do we get you financially independent so that you can do all the things you want with time, family, resources to start really fulfilling the calling that you have and building that multi-generational impact that you want for your family and community, because that's where you're going to find the most internal fulfillment. And most people don't realize the internal fulfillment is the piece that they've been missing all along this journey.
Look, one of the best things that I've heard recently, I was listening to a podcast about constraint theory, and they had this doctor come on, and he was talking about constraint theory, and he was saying how set the goal to impossible. And the reason you set your goal to impossible is because your brain will then start thinking of outside the box ways to get it done. But if you set it to realistic, if you're like, hey, we're doing 25,000, next month I want to do 30,000, your brain's going to see that as a realistic goal and already assume that you have all the answers to how to get there. And then you won't think outside of the box and then you never hit it. But if you set the goal to impossible, you're forced. You're like, hey, we're going to do, if you did $1 million this year, say next year, I'm going to do 30 million. How do we get to 30 million next year? Then you start thinking of all the outside the box ways to figure it out. It's one of the best things that, and he has this like, he has this saying that it's impossible unless, right? So always start with this, the 30 million, it's impossible unless, and then your brain's going to come up with 1,000 different ways that you could possibly hit 30 million. And look, if you fall short and hit 5 million, that's still better than the 1.5 that you were aiming for.
The, 10X is easier than 2X is a great book because I talk to the other planners on my team all the time and staff. And, it's constantly like, hey, what'd you do this year? Oh, I did 350K. Cool. What do you want to do next year? 400. I'm like, why? Why not like $1 million? Why not $1.5 million? I mean, how would I do $1.5 million? I was like, okay, well, let's figure out how you get paid, and then in our business, we get paid with financial planning fees. We get paid with assets that we're managing, and we get paid with insurance that we help place for clients. It's really it. So you have to do those three things for a lot of people and you'll get paid. So you can't tell me it's not possible to go from 350 to 1.5 because there's a number that got you to 350. And if that's 60 clients, then 5X that is 300 clients. So really it is physically possible if you had 300 clients, or you get 150 clients that are double your current client base, right? It's physically possible. But when I start making them write down how they would go about getting there, all of a sudden it didn't seem as complicated as they thought it was. One guy, for example, when I was coaching financial planner last year, I was like, how would we, 10X your amount of GDC you're making, which is, income for managing assets. And he's going on and on and on about how it's impossible because he'd have to pick up $400 million of GDC or $400 million assets to manage. And he's never done that before, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, okay, so in Florida, 6 times a year, there's a family office convention. They have about 500 attendees typically there. You can sponsor it for like $15,000, $20,000, $30,000, I think. The average person in a family office is $15 million and up. You get one family office that has 30 clients that doesn't work with a financial planner. You wine and dine them. You show them your philosophies and processes and how you want to cater to all their clients they have. That family office has $500 million of assets under management with another firm they don't even like. And now all of a sudden you become the guy that they want. They send all $500 million to you and your broker to manage. You've just picked up $500 million. Yes or no? Yes. Okay. How long did that take you? What do you mean, how long did that take you? I was like, well, it's really not a complicated thing. If you found out there was an event in February, you went in February, you wined and dined them in February, you met with them in March. Now you're probably starting to move all these clients over in April if they want to work with you. It took you 3 months to pick up $500 million in assets. Bro, but people don't do that. People actually do that all the time. You just don't know people that have done it, so you don't realize it's possible. All of a sudden, the dude's like, I'm going to every conference that I can. He has already picked up $50 million in assets since we had the conversation. That's more than he's picked up the last 4 years in a row combined.
Wow.
Because they have to realize as soon as we remove our limiting beliefs, right? I mean, think about it. Why don't we just stop saying, I'm not good at that? Just don't say it ever again. Just don't ever say, I'm not good at that. Let's go with, hey, up until this point, I haven't been good at that. So you can acknowledge that you've been mediocre or subpar up until this point,
Or I didn't
but
know
now I
how.
make a conscious decision that I'm gonna be good at it now.
So I think what you're saying is super important, and I want to just switch gears a little bit, but stay on this topic. If you're an employee of a company, right?
Yeah.
My biggest thing is I think people should have the right to make as much money as they want to make, and that doesn't necessarily mean you need to be the business owner, you need to be the entrepreneur. Sometimes I think people are better off being employees, and they can make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Without salary, how would you advise employees listening to this, being like, well, look, I don't get commission. I'm not a salesperson. I'm the COO, or maybe I'm the CMO. And, we have targets. I can make a couple of bonuses, but my dream is to make, $250,000 a year, but my salary will never be $250,000 a year. What's the steps to start ramping up in order to get that type of security? And I'll also phrase it as, what should business owners listening to this do to help their employees get to that level? So it's kind of a two-part question.
100% of the profits that a company makes is not owned by the owner. It's just paid to the owner. If you're a solopreneur, you're 100% responsible for 100% of the profits that your company made. If you have employees like a COO that's helping you hit milestones and targets, you absolutely should restructure your base pay to include variable comp based solely on increased revenue, increased profit margin efficiency, reduced expenses, increased profitability. Like, pick a topic on any of the line items you want to go through. Hours returned back to the lifestyle of the business owner. Hey, pay the COO more money so you don't lose them. Because the first part to your question was, if the owner's not going to work with you on it and you can't ever cap up, go find a new job, because you're in that job to get experience so that you can go to another job and then apply said experience. But most of the time you take lower salary early on because you didn't have the experience that you felt warrant the compensation you should be getting. But once you have the compensation, then you have not the compensation. Not once you have the competency to do the job, you can go after the compensation. Business owners, if they want to retain high-end talent, have to build a form of a bonus pool so that as the company becomes more and more profitable, that bonus pool can be liquidated out to all the employees for me, it's on a prorated basis. So like, my high-end staff gets more of the bonus pool than my low-end staff, but they all get a percentage. And so what I'm trying to do is put about 10% of our company profits back into the team, because now it's like, hey, here's what this looks like. The goal eventually is going to be to put more than that back into them. But in our current company structure where everything's at, I'm the only one that pays the bonuses. The other planners on the team don't pay bonuses and stuff like that. So, it's a little bit different on how our setup is. But our staff now knows, like, hey, if you bring in clients, you could be compensated based on how that increases overall revenue in the firm. Because if we're not paying cost to acquire said client and it saves us $2,500, there's $250 that goes to the staff pool, basically right there, And hey, if that client's going to, bring, say, $50 million of assets, hey, that's going to generate X number of dollars for the firm. And a portion of that's going to go to the staff pool, because we didn't have to acquire more staff, because we didn't have to go add staff to manage 500 new accounts at $1 million an account. We had to add one staff to manage the $1 million account. And so I think employees should look at it that way. But also go back to that reverse engineering we talked about. What's the end number you're at? What's your current number you're at? And what can you do along the way? And then I would just present a solution argument, So, hey, I have a problem. I want more money. Cool. What's your solution? Well, I don't know. I was hoping you just give me more money. How about we come up and reverse engineer our own solutions on where you feel like you've generated enough value to the company that you're at the $250K. Present it to your boss, because they've probably never even thought about it. And now you're giving them a framework to work with and a roadmap that you're more than comfortable of wanting to achieve. The roadmap to show them how you want to get there.
And then there's also the things they could do on their end, right? Like in terms of like investing and making sure that you have all these opportunities. Talk to me about like some of the most important investments, like 101 that you're getting started. You should definitely be putting some of your money into some of these things.
I don't know. That's a hard one because it depends, man. I got 25-year-olds that think crypto is the greatest thing in the
Well,
entire world.
do you think everyone should have a life insurance policy?
Yes.
Do you think everyone should
Whether or not
have,
it should be term or whole life, it's completely dependent on discretionary income. Like I was talking to a 23-year-old the other day, and I was like, hey, even if you had $1 million a term, you're the only child in your family. You already said you're going to be financially responsible for both of your parents, and your company's growing, but it's not anywhere yet. If your parents were the beneficiary of your policy, you get hit by a drunk driver because you stayed working late and now you're heading home at midnight, and at no fault of your own whatsoever, you get killed. You've now basically said, here's $1 million that you knew you were going to use to help your parents through a long-term care event or paying off their house or the things you wanted to do. And yeah, maybe you're paying $70 a month to do it, but you've locked in some of the legacy pieces that you've already established. That's why I love term insurance. It's so cheap. Putting $1 million a whole life on somebody might not be financially feasible because they don't have the discretionary income for it. But if you buy the right term insurance, you can convert that term insurance to permanent coverage later. So yes, things that you should have: renter's insurance, you should have car insurance, you should get disability insurance, especially if you're responsible for your own pay. I think any form of life insurance should always start as term, get the death benefit covered at a cheap price, much more cost effective that way, and then go convert into whole life as it makes sense. I don't like IULs or VULs because they're still based on like the term insurance actuarial tables, which means it looks great on accumulation, but I also have to focus on distribution for clients because I'm having 30-year relationships and I'm going to get them to and then through retirement, which means I need to distribute money from these things later. And if they're 75 years old and there's $3 million in that IUL, and then I start distributing funds from it, I have to put the risk back into the policy, but they're having to cover said risk at their 75-year-old mortality age, not the 35-year-old mortality age when they overfunded it. So if the IUL is just for accumulation and it'll never be for distribution, I think they're wonderful. If we're going to use them for distribution, I don't like them because you can't pay them up. There always is going to be an internal risk associated with the term component inside of it. Whole life has a completely different actuarial table. And so that's the only reason I write whole life and not IUL, is because I can fully pay for it in 20 years, like we talked about for your kids, and it will never have a mortality and expense cost associated with it again because it's fully paid up. So if I go pull all the money out when they're 70, there's no ongoing bill that's going to show back up again that has to get covered other than the interest if I put a loan against the policy. Okay, cool. But if you're surrendering said policy, there's that too. I mean, there's options. I like starting IRAs. I like funding the company 401k to at least get the match, just so you get used to sticking money into things. I'd much rather them fund their checking account and then build a little bit of savings, so we have 2 to 3 months of personal savings before we worry about funding retirement accounts, because there's taxes and penalties to pull money out of a retirement account if we need it. There's not taxes and penalties to pull money out of your checking account if we need it. So I would rather build that strong defensive front before I worry about max funding those retirement accounts. And then once you have the strong defensive front, then we can look at, hey, do I want to purchase a home? Do I want to rent it out? Or do I want to live in it to start building equity? Hey, do I want to do some of the, not syndication plays really early on, but do I want to own like a multiplex, triplex, quadplex, duplex, live in one side, rent out the other? And then it turns into, what am I comfortable with? Am I comfortable with real estate? Am I comfortable with crypto? Am I comfortable with the stock market? And then every client's going to be different. So it's then finding their comfort level and saying, hey, let's figure out how to start investing in these type of things because they'll help you generate additional passive income for your future that you want. But like we talk about all the time, rich is not wealthy. So to get wealthy, we have to generate passive income. Well, we have to create discretionary income today so that we can set money aside to create passive income in the future. So if we're constantly spending all of our money, if we're buying all the Rolexes, if we're wearing the $5,000 suits, if we're renting the high-end supercars to impress other people, great. It looks amazing. But if it doesn't have a significant ROI for your business, you're just stalling out what your future financial independence is going to look like. because those people will replace you next week with the next person that's going to put the credit card down for bottle service. So the second you start putting your credit card away, you'll realize the people that have been using you for the free ride and then the people that still utilize you for your friendship. Stick with the people that utilize you because they want to help you build your future. The people that have just been going on the free ride from you, you got to get away from. You got to level up in life. And it sucks because you're going to miss a lot of the people that you went to high school with and college with, because they're going to be perfectly happy staying exactly where they are for the rest of your life. And if you're truly an entrepreneur who wants to grow and have a lasting impact, you're never going to be satisfied with the status quo you're in. And you have to start surrounding yourself with people that want to talk about money, that want to talk about growth, that want to talk about goals and objectives and getting to a big exit, because those are the ones that are going to motivate you to be a better version of yourself. The buddies that are like, why aren't you drinking bourbon with me 3 days a week? And who cares if you go to the gym in the morning? Like, bro, it'll be there. You're making tons of money. Like, what are you worried about? It's just constantly going to be an anchor around you.
Let's talk really quickly before we wrap up around debt, using loans. Let's say you have access to, whether it's a home equity line of credit or even business loan. So many people are afraid to use it because they've been told debt is bad, keep debt low, don't use it. What are your thoughts and best practices if you are going to go into debt or fund growth through debt?
I love debt, personally. I mean, you can pay for everything with cash and it'll take you a lot longer to achieve anything you want to achieve. It's just the nature of the game. So by being able to leverage other people's money in a smart manner, you can increase the velocity of how quickly you can turn that money in other things. So if you need $10,000 of ad spend, but it's going to make $50,000 of revenue, then you don't have $10,000. Well, if you borrowed said $10,000, even if it was 20% for the entire year, you're going to owe $2,000. Well, if that 10,000 made you 50, and then your profit on that's 25, you can use 2,000 of that 25,000 in profit that month to cover the entire nut for what you did, and then cycle it again. I love home equity lines of credit because of the velocity available, right? Like paying down your house fast, but locking all the equity into the house doesn't help you, because if you need the money, you have to go refinance your house, you pay the closing costs all over again. Who knows what the upcoming interest rates are? And yeah, it sucks that they're variable right now at 8, 9, 10, 12%. But if you find a massive opportunity and you have $500,000 just sitting in your house that you can stroke a check for 3 days from now and acquire this thing at a massive discount, and who knows, maybe you sell it again in a month, $600,000. So you made $100,000 borrowing money from your house for a month and a half. Was that worth it? I would say so, but it doesn't mean you have to do it. However, if you don't put these pieces in place, it doesn't matter, because you don't ever have the opportunity to go do it if it makes sense. Yep. So constantly have always carried a HELOC on my home because... Well, especially
if your home goes up in value, you'll get more cash.
Exactly. And if I want to use it, I use it. If I don't want to use it, I just leave it paid for. So I'm not paying anything for it. You can get commercial lines of credit against a business as it grows. I mean, they're great. You can get hell, my Amex Platinum come Christmas, there's $70,000, $80,000 that go on it. Perfect. I'm not touching any of the
Remind me to get on that Christmas gift list. 70, 80,000. I want some Christmas gifts from you.
But we're not touching the money I have set aside for the office bonus pool. We're not touching the money set aside for salary and other things like that. I'm not dipping into any of those other accounts. It just goes on the Amex. I collect the points. Then over the next 2 months, we just pay the entire thing off, and then we're right back to where we were. And it doesn't matter, but we were still able to go buy all the gifts and do all the things that we wanted to achieve without slowing down and having a lot of fear. So you have to be smart with that. You can't just go over leverage everything you have and be house rich and cash poor and then not be able to cover the note. Because if you can't cover the notes, you're going to be in a world of hurt, because now you're over leveraged on everything and it's going to crumble. So using debt is a valuable resource that has to be treated with the utmost respect and not just squandered.
Rapid fire, 2 questions for you. You just talked about points. Use your points for business or pay for business. So would you use points to travel for business, or would you pay for business because you could write off the flight and use the points for personal stuff?
Yeah, I don't ever use points for business.
I agree with you.
I pay for everything with the company, take the deductions, and then a lot of times I'll cash the points in for gift cards. And I'll use them for staff giveaways or like client giveaways and things like that.
Last question for you. Owning your home, an asset or not?
100% depends on what you want to achieve. If you're buying a $2 million home and now you're spending $15,000 a month, it may be a liability if you don't have a crap ton of extra money. If you're owning a $250,000 home and you're spending $2,500 a month, it could be an amazing asset that you have going forward. Honestly, it depends. Like if you took the same money for the $2 million home and went and bought $400,000 or $500,000 homes instead, and then you collected rent, as long as the rent you're collecting more than exceeds the note, the maintenance, the potential vacancies, the increased inflation, plus any damages these tenants are going to do, plus the property management company that you're covering, as long as they still positively cash flow, the fourth house, you now live in yourself for that $500,000, and it should be helping offset your other fees. Plus, now you have some investment properties. You're probably doing some tax plays for depreciation. Maybe you did some cost segregation. You're offsetting some of your active income. So it can be a great idea. It just really has to determine if it fits in your current threshold of like the risk and a long-term enough perspective on why you want to do it. Because too many people I watch go do things because they just look for tax savings, but it doesn't fit where they're ultimately like wanting things to go. Because it doesn't fit where they ultimately want things to go, they don't follow the play the way they should. And then they think it's a horrible idea. And then they can't believe someone talked them into it. So I don't like the people that go out and buy a car right at the end of the year because they just need a tax deduction. Like go buy the vehicle if you needed the vehicle, but doing it just to do it to get the tax deduction. Well, instead of paying 33% taxes, you gave up 67% of the money that would have gone into your pocket for the vehicle. Oh, really? Yeah, that's how that works. If you had $100,000, you stuck it all in the car, great. You got a $33,000 tax deduction, but the $67,000 of cash that would have came to you is not coming to you anymore because it went to the car. So if you didn't really need the car, would you rather have the $67,000? And as soon as they look at it that way, they're like, man, if I kept that $67,000, I would have turned it into $400,000. You're not turning a $100,000 car into $400,000.
No, I get into this fight all the time. I actually believe it depends. Like you said, it depends. Like if you're sitting on a world of cash, buy a home, who cares? Whatever, makes no difference. But if I look at it, so we bought our house, but in the area that we live in and where we want to live in, you can't rent a home. Like you can't rent it. But if I could rent a house, I would do it all day long because that down payment, if I would have invested it over the course of living in my house, sure, I want to live in our house for 20 years. That's the goal, whatever. 20 years compounding, I would have made way more money. But that's why I love the HELOC, because the HELOC's almost like renting your house. I could pay the interest, I could pay more, I could pay less, I could do whatever I want.
There's something magical about putting $200,000 into your home equity line of credit and watching a big dip in your interest in your bill.
Only with the interest, but yeah.
And 6 weeks later saying, hey, I have a $200,000 opportunity. I'm going to pull it right back out.
Yeah.
You can't do that if you don't have it available, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I follow Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Owning a home, bad. Grant Cardone, owning a home, bad.
Yeah.
I met Grant and he asked me if I owned a house. I said yes. He yelled at me. So
yeah, well, strategy is perfect. That's why having someone that can help you blend them all together to find what's best for you, it's going to be the way. So
for the listeners,
I think you're going to do just fine, bro.
So for the listeners listening, they want to learn more. They want to get involved. How can they reach out to someone like you who could potentially help them achieve their wildest dreams and make their dreams come true?
Yeah, I mean,
as you flash the mug,
they're not all as amazing.
I love it. As I was asking that question, the mug slowly took a sip across the screen. Perfect branding. Good job. Well done.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, for me, I own Lighthouse Planning out of Nashville, and we cover 43 states. We work in the U.S. and Puerto Rico. People can always find me. I'm always somewhere. I got several other planners on the team that we use to help all of our different clients in whatever stage there are in the business. There's a ton of financial planners all around the country, depending on what you're looking for. I tell people, easy thing to do is pull up Broker Check, see if they've ever been in trouble. In 13 years of doing this, I've been in trouble one time because I had a client that wanted to do hard money lending. And I was like, great, it's probably a good idea. Go do it. It worked out great for 3 years. The fourth year it didn't. Then it was my fault. Yeah, I mean, it was because I told them, great, go do it. I mean, I'm not saying I was right or wrong, but they wanted to do it. Go ahead. So in my line of work, I'm like, if I've gone 13 years and the only time I got in trouble was because I told a client, go ahead and do hard money lending if you want to, I'm not that upset about it. But I look at people, like if they have a 7 and 66, they can do stocks, they can do everything really in the world. If they're a CREA licensed fiduciary, they hold themselves out as a fiduciary. That's amazing. That's really more what I think people should be looking at. I would say beyond that, like years of experience, if they have at least 5-7 years experience in the business, they probably have figured enough out that they can help you. If they're brand new in the business, they're still figuring out, and they're going to figure it out with your money. So
I'm gonna interrupt you and make this way simpler. I'm going to link how to get a hold of Chris or reach his company, because that should be the first call. Don't go any do research. Call Chris first. And I'm in Canada, so I'm in Canada. So this is I make no affiliate money off this. So certain stuff I can't even do with you, but you've pointed me in the right direction for a lot of different things. But I say let that be the first contact.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm easy to get a hold of.
Chris, thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate you.
I provide neither tax nor legal advice, and I'm not holding myself out there anything other than educational purposes only.
Like the disclaimer, we'll put that front and center.